Okay, hello class. So this is my discussion on a deeper understanding and overview of the Hammerman. So three ways or three characteristics that I found to describe the narrator. So while reading through my notes, I noticed that one characteristic shown throughout the story and kind of switched at the end is that the narrator is like a tomboy. Um, I cited two things, or I highlighted two things, two citations. The first one was on the first page, where they are talking about, well, her mom is describing her, as, and in quotes, bad enough you got to hang around with boys, she said, but fight with them too, and you would pick the craziest one at that. I think this is kind of describing how she hangs out around a lot of boys. So I thought that was interesting to add because throughout the story, they do talk about how she hangs out and acts and just is into things that boys are into instead of like things that the girls are into in the story. And another quote I found that backs up this characteristic of her being a tomboy. So when she's volunteering at the center that her mom wanted her to go to get more girly, I guess, she says, I got thrown out of the center for playing pool when I should have been sewing. Even though I had already decided that this was going to be my last fling with boy things, and starting tomorrow, I was going to fix my hair right and wear skirts all the time. This is another example of her kind of trying to set that goal for herself to stop being a tomboy and liking things that boys do and trying to switch off into doing more girly things. So, another characteristic I saw in the story was that she tries, or she doesn't try, I think that she's just naturally a tough and like hard person. I mean, the neighborhood that she lives in, everybody seems to be tough and hard. Like, hard. It's kind of like a slang word, I guess. Some people use it, some don't. But it just means that they have to act tough. And on page 36, which is the second page of the story, she says, I should have settled for hitting off the little girls in the schoolyard or waiting for Frankie to come in so we could raise some kind of hell. So this is kind of showing how she's a tough cookie. She doesn't like really hang around the girls and maybe do girly things that they're doing. So she's a little tougher than them. And I'm pretty sure in her neighborhood most girls maybe are this way. But this just kind of shows how in her personality she's a tough person. And then something else, another quote that I found that is in the fourth page, which is page 38. She says, you know the hammer he always carries in his fatigues. And they'd all nod, waiting for the rest of the long story. Well, I took that away from him. So this is kind of when she's telling everybody at school that Manny came, like, all patched up and with a cast and stuff because she had to beat him up. So she's trying to make herself look tougher than she already is because she clearly is a very tough person, a very tough kid. So her just kind of like making herself look more hard to fit in, like the, I guess not really the trendy, but just the stereotypes of like people in her neighborhood, like they want to be known as tough. So that's another characteristic, like example of how she tries to be hard, or I guess you can say tough. And then another characteristic about her that I found was that this girl is fearless. She is very brave and she's smart. So when they have the encounter with the police officers, she says like, oh, you better give him back the ball. And Manny is kind of like, he doesn't really like say anything, but she's the one who says, and in quotes, you better give him his ball back. Manny don't take no mess from cops. He ain't bothering nobody. He's gonna be a Mr. Basketball when he grows up. So she's kind of like standing up for him when he's kind of like in this situation where he doesn't know what to do. So I thought that was interesting, and it shows how she's a very like a fearless person. And then another quote not saying that she's kind of a smart ass, but this just kind of goes to show that she's not like afraid of law enforcement. Where she tells them the gates are open. I said real quiet like, and this here is a free country, so why don't you give him his ball back? She's like standing up for it. Manny, even though he's known to be like the craziest person in the neighborhood, she's a fearless person. So I think that's another thing that kind of like, I guess, backs up that she is a fearless character in the story. And then identifying 5 passages where the author used humor to where she used humor to deepen the narrator's character. So the first one I found was when she talks about the deviant family. So when she's talking about like, oh, I found out that I'm from a deviant neighborhood, she states how I showed my mother the word in the dictionary, but she didn't pay no mind to me, and it was my favorite word after that. I ran it into the ground till one day my father got the strap just to show me how deviant he could get. So she's kind of like making a joke how her dad, you know, used a gun to show how deviant like he, you know, they are. And I thought it was kind of just funny because she just kind of like brushes it off like if nothing happened. So that was kind of like funny to me. So I thought it was pretty funny to include. And then also when the officers like approach them at the basketball court, and they ask him like, what are you guys doing? She says, in quotes, he's doing a layup, I'm watching. I said with my smart self. I thought that was funny too, because she might just think it's like I mean, it is funny to think that like someone would have been like, you know, being such a smart ass. It's funny. But to her, maybe it's just like the way that she's used to responding, and officers don't know that or recognize that that's just how they talk. And then something right under that I've also found that was like humor that the author used to portray the character, when she says that then we 3 just stood there like a bunch of penguins watching Manny go at it. So they're clearly in a situation that's kind of like sketchy at this point, because they might not see it as like how they might not see how easily this situation with the police officers could have escalated, and she's kind of still like thinking jokes about it, and it is kind of funny like what's going through her mind, like that, like they're just a bunch of penguins like that. I thought that was pretty funny, and it just shows how she's very nonchalant, and like she's just very used to this type of neighborhood that she lives in. So it just shows how her character is very I mean, she socialized in the violent neighborhood, so she kind of just, it's natural to her. Another humor that I found, another like piece of text that was humorous to me, is when she said, and I wish Manu had fallen off the damn roof and died right then and there and saved me from all this aggravation of being killed with him by these cops who surely don't come off as no 5th grade reader. Wait, who surely didn't come out of no 5th grade reader, because in this part she's talking about how her kindergarten teachers kind of described cops as like friendly and nice, and I thought it was funny that she was just making a joke, like being like, oh my god, like I wish I would have, you know, I wish he hadn't fallen off the roof, like he had fallen off the roof and died, so we wouldn't have to be in this situation, which she thinks is like worse. Which was really like like funny but interesting at the same time, because you're like, wait, what? It's just a funny thing to think about, but it goes to show how they have different struggles and different they define danger as like different than other people would compared to someone who lives in a violent neighborhood. And then the last piece of like humorous and nonchalantness that she shows in the reading is when she says, but they didn't kill him after all that because Miss Rose heard he was in some kind of big house for people who lose their marbles. So she's kind of like seeing this as like, oh, he just went away because he's crazy, because I mean that's what they define him as in the neighborhood, as being crazy. But I think she kind of doesn't really seem to understand like what happened. And I think it's kind of funny how she's just like, for people who lose their marbles, like it was just kind of off guard to, like, when I read this, I kind of saw it as a serious situation, and to her, it wasn't very much of a serious situation, so I thought it was kind of funny to just see how her humor is, I guess she has, like, dark humor because they're so used to this kind of, like, violence and stuff in the neighborhood. And finally, when the author talks about or explains how the officers, like, something must have snapped in his head because all of a sudden he was, you know, like, just hot for taking Manny to jail. I think what the author was kind of talking about here is that the officer, the cop, lost his temper and lost his patience with these kids. Or maybe he just realized, like, okay, I need to find something, anything really, to be able to push him to do something to me so I can take him to jail. Because I mean, I think disrespect towards an officer really is triggering to them, and when you fight back, they don't like it. And I think he kind of just lost his patience, and I think that's kind of like the word snapped was kind of just there to emphasize that the officer was done being nice and that he was ready to do what he thought was the right thing to do, and maybe even get aggressive. I feel like after this, like, they kind of explained, you know, how like she basically doesn't believe in nice cops, and it kind of just goes to back to the, oh, he snapped. It's just kind of saying, like, oh, he showed his real colors, like, he clearly does not like us, and he clearly is a targeting us. So I feel like at some point, in some shape and form, she was, like, starting to realize what was happening.